listener production.
The creators of this podcast would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which it is recorded. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are the first storytellers of this land. We pay respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, as well as any Indigenous people who may be listening today.
The following episode of TOFOP is rated MA for mature audiences. It may contain sexual references, time travel references, allegations of bin misconduct, and mild coarse language. TOFOP advises that this episode is not suitable for anyone under the age of 15 or anyone who thinks a comedy conversation between two old mates sounds like a terrible idea for a show. Minors must be accompanied by a parent or guardian. This is John Deek speaking.
Everyone relax. This is TOFOP. I'm Charlie Clausen.
I'm Will Anderson. Hello, and thank you for watching.
And this is, we could talk about it every time, but this is an interesting process, I assume, for listeners who've been listening from week to week, because for them, just another week has passed since we last talked, but for you and I, it's been 3 weeks and 5 countries have passed between us last
To be
week.
fair, I have only been responsible for one of those countries. Much
I didn't
like
even count that country, 6. Sorry.
much like I've stayed in the one spot. Much like the content of TOFOP, it does really rely, like particularly in the last couple of years, on you doing things and me just staying in the one spot, and then hopefully you bring some content to the table that I can make fun of. So hopefully that is the case again.
It was funny. I caught up with Osher when I got back about a week ago to talk about Dad Pod and stuff. And
I saw a picture of you and Osher at the Australian Podcast Awards. Was Dad Pod up for an award at the Australian Podcast Awards?
We were up for the Best Parenting Podcast. Odd system of announcing winners at the podcast award. I've never been to a podcast awards before.
No, because we don't enter.
Because we don't enter.
Because it costs $200 to enter.
That's right.
And at tofop.com, we do not believe that is a good allocation of the limited resources we have.
Exactly. But I felt like, I wanted to go and support the show, and not just, Osher, but, there's a lot of people who work behind the scenes. And so I only landed back in the country on Monday, had an hour at home, and then jumped on a flight to Sydney. But it was about 45 minutes into the award ceremony that I was like, this is a mistake. Like award shows can be a mistake, most of the time. But, when you're jet lagged and stuff, and our category was done, like we were the third up, and it's like there is still 27 categories to go or something.
Now, did you consider just storming out? Because I assume you didn't win.
We
right?
did not win. We came, but how's this? We came runners up. So they don't just announce the winner. Hey, here's the nominees, here's the winners. They announce the nominees, and then they do a bronze, silver, gold, right?
Hang on. How many nominees are there?
That's the point I'm getting to. In some categories, there was like 5. In some categories, there was 4. So,
shut up. No, you can't do that.
What it felt like.
And the loser of this category.
The 2 losers, the singular loser.
Yeah. In a 4-person category, you cannot be giving out a 3rd, 2nd, and 1st. You might as well say cruel. In last place.
It was hard. And once I realized that, because we were like the 3rd award up, I'm like, please let us just play. I thought bronze, just give us bronze at least. I didn't think we'd win, but just give us a placing. So I don't even know how the awards are judged. I mean, I don't know if it's like fan voted or if there's like a team of people or whatever, but I do not know what qualifies a podcast expert. And then podcasts are so niche. Like, are you hiring experts in parenting? Were there a bunch of like pediatricians listening to the podcast, or was it just like me? I mean, if someone asked me to judge like a parenting podcast, I wouldn't fucking know which is a good one or a bad one. That's why I'm doing one. I'm trying to work it out.
I imagine there is some sort, and again, I have know nothing about these podcasts, but I imagine there is some sort of industry awards, because I know there is fan voted awards because I hear them talk about it on the Weekly Planet, right? There is some that are fan voted, but the majority of the industry awards. That is generally the case with most awards, right? Whether it be the ARIAs or the actors or the Logies, they have industry categories where they'll have like a panel of people from the industry who vote on the awards. versus they'll have like popular choice awards, which is just your general, anybody can vote for those awards. I imagine that it's similar with the podcast awards as well. Here's what I will tell you. I have been a person who has voted on things in the past. I have voted, I know, in the actors, and I have voted in the arias. I've been on those like industry panels at various stages in my career. And when I was doing both of those awards, it certainly wasn't, it wasn't like they said, okay, you're a comedian and you host like a panel show, so we're going to get you to vote on comedy and panel shows. No. It was like you vote on everything that's up for an actor. And I assume the system is meant to be that you go out and then watch like an episode of each of those things. Here's what I can tell you I did not do. That.
Yeah, okay.
You vote for the one that you've heard of or the people that you like or the one that you think might be the best based on your limited amount of information, particularly in the categories. There might be some categories where you genuinely have, listened to all 5 podcasts or watched all 5 movies or whatever it might be. But there are some categories that you're like, I'm never going to have, like, I haven't heard of any of these in this category. And the arias, like, I'm not even in the music industry.
Yeah.
I just worked at Triple J. And they're like, do you want to,
good enough.
That'll do, I guess.
Welcome.
You get to decide which the best country album was.
I will. I went and saw Armageddon, and now I'm in NASA. It's amazing. They invited me to join NASA. Sorry, the only plans I can come up with, though, is just like drilling holes in asteroids and blowing them up.
And like the idea that they then rank them, like that you get to hear what third, second, and first is. I mean, that I think they should go a step further. I want to see the Australian Podcasting Awards rank every podcast in that category in order. So if it's parenting podcast, they literally go through every parenting podcast on iTunes and they rank them in order from last through to first.
Well, what I agree with you, and I think there's no way that people. I'm not casting aspersions on the Australian Podcasting Awards, but I would be surprised if people listen to every second of every podcast, because you've got a lot of podcasts to listen to. So
at best, they'd only be listening to an episode of each podcast in the category.
At best. Like I'm thinking 5 minutes. I reckon if it was my job, I'd go, this guy's voice annoys me. I'm not listening to this anymore.
I mean, imagine if we entered and this was the podcast they listened to, where we spent the first 5 minutes talking about how much we legitimate and distrust
podcasting
awards
panel, the Australian Podcasting Awards.
I mean, I don't think it would do well for us. I don't think we would even get a bronze.
This should be the episode we submit.
We send it in.
Brilliant. I love it. Well, I think I agree with everything you said. And I think that that's why it has paid dividends to be at least, I would like to think that he considers us friends, but at the very least, internet friendly with Reed Parker, because he's done all our podcast artwork. And the one that we use is his Beyond Thunderdome spoof, where it's me and Osh replacing Mel Gibson and Tina Turner. It's great and it's hilarious. And I imagine that if I was sifting through all the nominees, I'm like, well, these guys have got good artwork. So I'm sure that reflects the quality of the show.
In fact, maybe we should have entered all the TOFOP ones based on that. We might have about 8 Australian Podcasting Awards.
But what I realised talking Osh, because when he held a seat for me, I got there quite late, I had a delayed flight, and we were chatting and stuff, and he was talking about all these.
Can I ask where it was, by the way? Just because I saw the photo of you and Osher there.
At the Seymour Centre.
Now,
sitting next to Osher, by the way, and I know it's a podcasting awards, but it's essentially like a radio industry awards. There's a lot of radio people there. Sitting next to Osh in the front row was like sitting next to Jack Nicholson at the Oscars. Like, if there was cameras, they would have always been cutting to him, because the MC kept making Osher jokes, kept referencing Osher. There was like he was referenced about 4 or 5 times in the first like half an hour. So I was like, oh.
Can I ask, and this is only based on the photo that I saw, the Seymour Centre doesn't seem like it has a whole bunch of charm and atmosphere inside. Was that room particularly, like, it looked very conference roomy? It wasn't particularly.
It didn't feel awards. It didn't feel awards showy.
No.
I mean, it was weird though, because like Osher and I were sitting there in jeans and t-shirts. Like Dan Illich, who won for Rational Fear, was wearing like a sloppy, like unwashed, unironed t-shirt, which was referenced by Lewis on stage. Like. But then there was women in like who busted out their best dresses, so it was a very strange mix of kind of, it was an awards show, but then there were some dudes in tracksuit pants. So
Was Abby Chatfield there?
Don't think so. I didn't stay long enough to know. I literally left after 45 minutes because I was so tired.
Okay. Again, should have stormed out.
That would have been, well, yeah. I mean, does that bode well for like a parenting podcast where, we're trying to make dads better dads, that like the slightest hint of kind of some resistance that I just storm at, I can't control my emotions?
I mean, okay, that's a good point. But the fact that you left early, that's probably a good dad thing. They probably should have given the award to you if the other people who had a parenting podcast were still there late at night soaking it up. What sort of parents are they?
Yeah, exactly.
They should be at home with their children. You were the responsible one who went home early.
Having said that, I did arrive home, see my daughter for about an hour and then leave again because Daddy has to go to an awards ceremony. What kind of parenting is that?
Okay.
But talking to Osh that night, he was sort of talking about the show and everything he'd been doing for it. And then I was like, oh, I realize who I am. I'm the Will in this arrangement. Like Osh is the one who puts in all the groundwork. He preps the show. He sort of talks to him about this, what we're going to talk about. And then I just come on and say funny things or attempt to say funny things. I'm like, I like this role.
It's fun to be the Will. Yeah. I recommend it.
It's you know what is great about it is it's all the plaudits and none of the responsibility. If it goes well, great. If it doesn't, well, no one really cares because it's not like it's your passion project.
Yeah, but I mean, this is, again, in this scenario, you have been both. You've been both the Will and the Charlie because you've gone to this thing in your capacity as the Will of Osher in your relationship. Yeah. But then you've brought this content to this podcast as the Charlie.
As the Osher.
And I've got to be the Will. You're the Osher. Yeah, you're right. I'm Charlie. Hang on, I'm Charlie and you're Osher.
So it's been a tumultuous few weeks. So I didn't know if I could talk about it at the time, but I've since spoken to the producers. It's fine. The reason I've been traveling is I've been hosting Getaway. So this job sort of came up a few months ago, and it's
one of the great media jobs. Getaway, isn't it?
It fucking is. Like I know you're meant to sort of be like talk things down and but. It is one of the best jobs going around. Like it's fucking all the fun of travel with none of the hassle, none of the responsibility. Your accommodation's taken care of. Someone handles the visas. You just go to the fun stuff and do, well, not necessarily fun stuff, but you just go to the interesting stuff and just do all that and don't have to worry about, I've got to pack my bags and get to the next place or got to book this flight to whatever. It's all done for you.
Yeah. And like you said, maybe not necessarily the fun stuff, but the stuff that's probably worth doing that perhaps you wouldn't have done if you went to those places left to your own devices. So, yeah, because you're doing it to show off, wherever you are and what the things are to do in wherever you are, and it's all been arranged for you. I think, I think it's a great, it sounds to me like an excellent way to travel. I mean, I'm sure that you don't get to spend as much time in any of the places that you would like to because of the nature of having to keep moving and keep filming and doing these sort of things. But insofar as media jobs go, it's a good media job.
Well, here's what I loved about it. And this is like from someone who hasn't done a lot of hosting, mainly, acting is probably what I'm best known for and what I've sort of been employed the most as. So I'm used to it taking forever. Like I'm used to like makeup, wardrobe, sit around, come up, stand up, work for like 5 minutes, sit down, wait another 15 minutes, the lights have been changed, get up. And that, so that takes like a scene might take an hour and a half to shoot like a, 30-second, 40-second scene. But hosting, it was me, my producer, a cameraman and a sound guy, and that was it. And it was just do it, get out, get done. It was like, felt like I was one of the Expendables, like just getting dropped off in this remote location, go out, we need this, we need that, the other. And because I guess I have an acting background, like the producer, they come up with all the copy for you. And so they said beforehand, we can write it for you, just send you like pages and you can learn it if that's what you want to do. Or if you feel like you can wing it, that's great as well. And I said, oh, well, let's see how I go. So write some stuff for me and I'll see how I go. And so the first couple, I'm like, yeah, great. But I think I can do this. Like I can come up. I talk a lot on my various podcasts. So then like, all you're really doing is just thinking on your feet. So the hours are long because you try and get as much footage as you can. but it's always something different. It's always something new. And it's that thing of you don't repeat the same action again and again and again to get it right. The challenge is just get it right in one take, like, or just get it as the sun is rising, get this line out. And it was just like, it was so much fun. I was like, fuck, have I been in the wrong, like I've sort of been doing one form of entertainment, but maybe that's where I should have been like putting my attention. Or can I do both? Like they feel like two separate skills, but at the same time, there is some kind of crossover.
Well, you know who's very good at doing that sort of stuff, of course? Osher.
Yes.
And you've had the experience of being the Osher in this podcast, and it's given you the essential skills you need to actually become Osher.
Well, I remember I used to be a kid and I'd watch when Michael Palin did all his travel documentaries. And I was always kind of bummed out as a kid because I'm like, oh, that's, the guy from Monty Python. And it's like, oh, he's been incredibly serious as he talks about talks with his chauffeur about. Yeah. But at the same time, like I used to love watching those shows because it's still Michael Palin traveling through a place. And, I've never really watched travel shows or really given them much thought until I actually started doing it. It's like, oh, this is a great form of entertainment because it's always something new. And good TV is like putting people out of their element. Suddenly you're in a place where, everything feels different and you're trying to communicate your experience of it to an audience at home while still having as authentic as, obviously it's not completely authentic. There's cameras there and, there's the trip's been designed, but the experience you're trying to make as authentic as possible. And it's like, oh, why have I been ignoring this genre of entertainment for so long? Like, I understand it's very popular. Maybe I should watch some more.
I love, I like a food travel show more than I like just a regular travel show.
I went to a bakery in Hoi An that Anthony Bourdain had declared it had the best banh mi in the world.
And
they've got a big photo of him. It's fucking, he's not lying. He knew his shit, Anthony Bourdain.
And Anthony Bourdain is a liar who should be returning in his grave.
We should take away whatever podcast awards he was ever given should be stricken from the record. They have a big photo of him in the entrance to this banh mi. It's this little kind of street food cafe. And it's been the same owner for 30 years. It's a secret formula, all that kind of stuff. But it was beautiful. As I say in Vietnam, ooh la la. And that's because they did have French colonialism for a short time. So some do speak French.
Here's what I would say. I have fantasized often about what would my version of one of those sort of shows be? Because my problem is that I have a limited diet, being a vegetarian, suddenly but I thought, well, maybe that could be the angle. You travel the world, but you have to go to places where you can find the finest vegetarian food in the world, which seems like, that could be an angle for one of those shows. So it's funny. And, I'm pretty hopeless.
Yeah.
So
Mate, keep talking. I'm listening. This is a great idea for a show.
So you throw this hopeless person into these scenarios that they can't really cope with, trying to find vegetarian food. But the thing is that I just know what I like when it comes to food. So that place where it's the best banh mi in the world and they got a picture of Anthony Bourdain. There would be 900 pictures of me all over the place of me just going, this is the best vegetarian meal I have ever had in my life. This is the best toasted cheese sandwich I have ever eaten.
This is the best hotel buffet I've ever had in my life. You're meant to actually leave the hotel and try some of the other
things. Don't have to. This is great.
This French
you can
toast.
Eat as much as you want. What are you talking about?
Mate, there was one buffet, one hotel we were staying at with a buffet breakfast. They would make these little French toasts, but they would cook it fresh. So you'd sort of go up to the egg station or whatever, and they would make it. And I don't know what they did. I've never been a French toast guy, but I think they were mixing either a bit of some kind of a sweet syrup or sugar with a bit of cinnamon in the egg, and then just the. I don't really I try not to eat white bread, but think of the whitest Think of a bread so white it's got like an alt-right Twitter account. It is the whitest of, it's the Aryan slice of bread. Like there is no nutritional value.
They must have just like, you would have been like what I said that I was going to be like, because you don't normally eat things that have like, so everywhere you went, you must have been like, this is the best. I'm full of sugar and MSG and I've never felt better in my life. We can shoot for 23 hours a day.
100%. But this French toast was just like, it was so good that it was
Would you say it was ooh la la?
Ooh la la. As they say in Vietnam, ooh la la. It's absolutely delicious. But it was just that that part of the trip was all great. Like, hotels and stuff. I love traveling. It's sort of, I haven't really, this trip was, the first time overseas since COVID. But it was, I sort of said to the producer and the cameraman, I said, look, like, I want to do a good job. So I'm up for anything. Like, whatever you put your rookies through, like, serve it up. So, of course, there was the let's go to one of the wet markets and you can eat something weird challenge.
Oh.
And so,
I mean, after the last couple of years, that's a tougher challenge than perhaps it was even 3 years ago. Would you like to try this bat, sir? This pangolin?
I had watched some like old episodes on Getaway on YouTube and stuff, and I saw I think I saw someone eating like a cricket or something like that. I'm like, I can eat a cricket. So we went to this market in Cambodia, and there was a choice of cockroaches, deep fried tarantulas, or deep fried baby birds. So like just basically looked like still had their heads and claws, their talons and stuff like that. So
so before you say what you did, I would do the cockroach. So feels snacky to me.
But all right, before you settle on the cockroach, let me describe the sizings of things. So the baby birds are actually small.
Yeah, but I don't like the idea of eating like a baby anything. So that the baby bird rules that out. I mean, I know that like people eat birds already, like chicken and turkey and all those things are birds, but the idea of eating like a baby anything I'm not into that. So no baby bird.
Okay, so then slightly smaller, but not that much smaller, were the cockroaches. So they were about 1.5 inches. They were big cockroaches. And then the tarantula was probably about 3 times the size of the cockroach. And the one thing I thought when I saw them was like, well, at least they're deep fried, so they won't resemble what they are.
That would have been my thought as well. If you deep fry something enough, then you won't know. But I assume they still look like the things that they are.
They look
when
like
they've been
a more
deep-fried.
nightmarish version of that thing.
Yeah, so I don't want to eat a deep fried baby bird that looks like a baby bird. No, thank you very much.
If Freddy Krueger was a bird, that's what it looked like. But I said to them, look, if you want good TV, I said, I'm actually a little arachnophobic. Like I don't dig on spiders. And so they said, cool, that's definitely what we're going to shoot then. And so we were going around just grabbing little things at the market, but I spotted where we were going to end up. And I was not prepared for like just how big tarantulas are and how still alive they look. Like they've got all their limbs, even little sort of bits of hair on them and stuff. And so there's 2 things going on in my mind. One is like I'm getting a bit of the heebie-jeebies and not like a panic attack, but I'm like, oh, is there a cool exit strategy for this if I've changed my mind? Like I've already said that I'm up for anything and, like I don't want to lose face, but is there a way to exit the situation which doesn't make me look like a complete wimp?
No. Would be my answer. Absolutely no. You've committed to this. You've said yes. You know, it's like going on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here or something. You know that at some stage this is what you've
like a donkey's dick. Yeah. Not just, you may eat someone else's dick. Look, I've never watched I'm a Celebrity, but I'm assuming both dick eatings are done. Are they? I don't know. Do people look up on I'm a Celebrity? Maybe not.
They're out in the jungle not washing. You'd have to be pretty desperate, I suppose.
You're right. Who's hooking up with no bloody soap?
It would be great, though, if they were just like, okay, you've got 2 choices in this situation. You can eat this donkey dick or you can eat Danny Green's dick.
with the donkey. The donkey's dick at least would be clean, right? Because they've cooked it. They've cleaned it and cooked it, or is it like a jungle donkey dick?
Well, yeah, they've no. From what I see on those shows, I feel like they make it as gross as they possibly can make it, as long as it's not going to kill the person. But from what I hear, like you know, they're happy to upset your stomach and like have you have like diarrhea for 3 days and like vomit up and stuff like that. So they're not. Yeah, they're just.
Well, no one told me that.
Yeah.
No, and
I don't think Getaway would be doing that because Getaway's trying to entice people to go on a holiday. I'm a celebrity, get me out of here is not trying to get people to like go on a holiday in the jungle. But
this particular segment, it was the same thinking, which is let's get someone on TV to do something they're not comfortable with and that'll be fun. Every time I used to watch like shows like Fear Factor or I think there was other ones where they would, you know, eating bugs was like a challenge, or drinking snake wine. And I'm always like, how is that like fear related? It's more gross. Like I don't associate fear and being grossed out as being the same thing, but I get it now because like the idea of eating this bug activated like, you know, fear in me. So we went over to the basket, and so this is all on camera. And so they're saying, look, we just want your absolute natural reaction. So just, you know, tell us about how you feel about spiders and all that kind of stuff. And I was with a guide as well, Lovey, who was like, you know, talking me through the history of it. And the reason, you know, it's actually, it's steeped in kind of tragedy, the reason why this is street food. And it has to do with the Khmer Rouge. And, you know, when people were desperate and starving and, you know, living in the jungle, they were so desperate that they would just eat whatever protein they could get their hands on. So there's an element of like, yeah, this is like all fun and stuff, but you don't want to be disrespectful of why this is a food, you know. Oh, how this is so disgusting. How can you know? No, that's not an option. But in my head, I'm like, this is disgusting, and I don't want to eat this, right? So I put it in. I ask Lovey. I say, like, how was this normally done? Like, do you pluck the legs off?
Yeah, that's right. That's good. I'm glad that you actually thought to ask that. Like, is there a way? Is there a way that they normally eat it?
Well, interesting you should say that because he said, no, just like, you know, just stick it in your mouth, start at the legs and eat your way through. And so I did. And look, it's actually was not as, I thought it was going to be a lot sort of like chunkier because they're thick Huntsman. But what it actually tasted like was beef jerky, just like dry protein, a little
gristly.
Bit gristly, but really dry. Like it was sort of hard to swallow. They'd obviously put spices and stuff on it, but clearly, you know, I always made the joke that you deep fry anything and cover it in like sugar or salt. It's edible, but yeah, and there's some things that are a bit tougher than others. But the worst part was the legs, because it's a spider's legs. They're designed to cling to things. So as you're swallowing the legs, you can it feels like it is crawling down your throat because you're just getting these little prickly legs. So I was going through that, and then I got to the abdomen, which is really tough, and got through that.
Does anything squirt? Is there any like?
No, that's what I mean. It's like
all dry.
Beef jerky.
There's nothing inside that like.
No secret surprise.
I'd be happy with it all being like dry and gristly than I would with something at some stage popping. I don't think like when I watch those things when they eat an eye or something like that, and then it like the eyeball pops and it's. That's too much for me. But if I knew that it was all just going to be dry and gristly, I think I'd be more comfortable with that.
Yeah. So, well, actually, and you're right, because once I sort of realized the texture of it wasn't squishy, because I just didn't want to taste any, I don't know, like I don't know the anatomy of a spider, like web spinners or guts or any shit like that, but it wasn't. So I got that take down, and then this is a bit of like, you know, behind the scenes. Had to do a second take because they wanted to get a closer angle on it. So I actually ended up eating 2 spiders, but I was okay with it by that stage.
And then they were like, oh, actually, something happened in that one.
Sorry.
You've got to eat one more spider.
Like Kubrick, 100 takes later. Yeah, we think we got it. So then later on, so we're on this cruise ship. So
now, can I ask you this? Sorry, before we move on from the eating.
No, this is still within the spider story.
Okay, cool. But I want to know with the second spider, was it easier to eat the second spider once you knew what it was going to be like, or was it harder because you'd already eaten you were full from eating a spider?
It was easier because I just chewed I chewed like crazy. The first time I'm trying to talk, and entertain and convey the feeling of what it's like. The second time I'm just like, I'm going to shove this in.
I'm just going to eat the spider.
But it was like I did drink about 2 liters of water after that because I'm like, I can still feel the legs inside my throat. So back on the cruise ship that we were traveling up the Mekong on, they would change the menu each day and to reflect, whatever part of Cambodia or Vietnam you're in. So you're getting these like delicious sort of regional dishes. But one lunch, they had like a bowl of tarantulas, but then they had cockroaches and crickets and silkworms, like every bug under the sun. And I was talking to one of the crew.
So I've eaten a cricket.
Right.
Because that's a bit of a trend, because, if you're vegetarian, apparently crickets don't count, like they're insects, and you're allowed to.
Are the crickets cool with that?
Well, I don't think anyone's asked the crickets, but apparently that's the new sustainable way.
Well, we asked them, and ironically, all we heard was crickets.
Crickets, so they were fine with it. No, I mean, as a comedian, I felt like they're the natural enemy of comedians. So I was like, fuck you guys. I guess it's because they're sustainable, right? Like the idea is there are so many of them that they're a sustainable way of having protein. And I tried them, and they seemed quite edible, like crickets, I've got to say. Just they felt very like any sort of, what's that, like a whitebait or a shrimp or exactly. Something like that. They had that same sort of texture.
They're quite small too, so you can throw like a handful in.
Yeah. By the way, so was there any after effects, like on your digestion of eating the…
No. Okay. And I also did not acquire
spider powers? That was going to be my follow-up question. I was waiting, so I didn't seem too silly, but I was like, then, have you got any spidey senses?
But I got anatomically accurate spider powers, so I can shoot silk out of my ass.
Oh, okay.
But it's made travel really, really awkward.
You're terrified of your own reflection.
That's right. So I was like, you know what? I'm not going to have this any more spider bit. I wussed out on the cockroach. I'll try that. And I was slightly smaller. And so I ate the cockroach, and it was 10 times worse than the spider. It was actually everything I imagined a cockroach would taste like. And you know how you're like, oh, I'd hate the squish? There was a squish.
There was squish. Okay.
So I busted through the shell and the wings and got to the squish, and that was just horrifying. But at the end of all that, one of the local chefs who prepared lunch came up and said, oh, you had this. And I said, yeah. And we did some street food at the market. And he said, so did you eat the abdomen of the spider? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, oh, well, I wouldn't do that. and he's like, and did you eat the shell on the cockroach as well? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, oh, no, you just meant to scoop out the inside. So it's like, I don't know if I've actually had the accurate experience or if you gave me a cheeseburger and I ate it with a paper still on top. I don't know what I've eaten really.
Like the first time somebody handed me edamame and I was like, you're trying to eat the whole thing. Yeah. You're like, oh no, you meant to. I know. It's fine. You meant to take it out.
This girlfriend of mine told me this story about she's got this little brother who she loves, is quite protective of, and he was moving to LA from Canada. And she wanted to kind of make sure that, everyone looked after him. And so she was telling all her friends how smart he is. He got into university on his own, on the scholarship and blah, blah, blah. And so they took him out for, I can't remember I think it was Mexican that night, his first time in LA. And she'd been telling all her friends that my brother's this super genius, really smart. They all look at the end of the table and he's eating the burrito, but he's eating the paper on top of the burrito because he didn't realize he had to take it down. He'd never eaten Mexican food before. And they're like, is that your brother, the super genius?
The genius. So this isn't as good as people said, to be honest. It tastes really papery. Maybe he thought it was like a giant rice paper roll, like the paper was part of the…
Yeah, I think he thought
experience.
It was edible paper. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I hope so. Now, I wanted to get to one email in particular before we go because it's quite long, but I read this at the airport lounge this morning and it was like, we need to talk about this. It's beautifully written and there's so many highlights in this that I'm sure that we'll stop along the way, and I think this will take us out to the end of the episode. Before we do that, we should just mention that, yes, all the shows are on Listener now. You would have seen anything on social media. Two Guys, One Cup is just the exclusive listener to the Listener platform. Everything else you can still download it where it is. It's just that Listener is now supporting us and helping us produce the shows. And this is a good thing because without Listener, it is uncertain whether or not we could keep making the shows. But, they've been nothing but supportive of us. We're happy to be there. But no one freak
basically,
out.
no, don't freak out. It's not going to
Paywall
change
or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, you might not even know that it has happened. Basically, what happened was the place that used to host our podcasts, they got taken over, bought out by Spotify.
Yeah.
And we were like, and they were like, so your podcast will just be over on Spotify? And we're like, will Spotify give us any money for that? And they were like, nah, they're not really interested in that. So we were like, okay, well, let's see if there's somewhere that will host the podcast. And we've had such a great experience.
I just pick up. It wasn't, they actually said, no, we'd love to keep you. We'd love to keep you. And we said, how much would you love to keep you? And it turns out not that much.
Not much at all, to be honest. We'd love it. Is what we're saying. We're not going to do anything to show that
pay
love
for it.
or prove. No, that's not love. It's not love if I'm paying for it.
Oh, I'm sorry, you guys are so superficial.
You've heard this, the money can't buy me love. This is love. Stay for that reason. And we have had, apart from like the people who were mad that we obviously went to Listener exclusive for Two Guys, One Cup, Listener themselves have been really cool for us to work with. They've publicized our podcast heaps. They've introduced us to a new audience. This is a different deal to that, though. This is, if you don't want to get the app, there's heaps of great stuff on the app and you can listen to Two Guys, One Cup there. But if you just want to listen to it in the regular places that you listen to all the shows, they will still be in those regular places. We should take a moment to acknowledge that Podcast Mike won't be as like intimately involved in our day-to-day as he has been for the past lots of years that he has been on our podcast, but he will still be part of our world and our family. And
he'll still be producing Two Guys, One Cup.
Yes. And hopefully also appearing on Two Guys, One Cup to talk all about Mike's big year of football, which is going to be 2023. And he has, and part of the reason that he's actually not going to be involved intricately in the day-to-day of it is because, to be honest, he's just got a lot of his own creative stuff going on that is growing and growing, and we want to help support as well. So Podcast Mike is just one of the best people that we've had the pleasure to work with, and he's been so integral to these shows coming out in the last few years, and he'll still be part of the extended family and universe.
I mean, I did see a bit of chatter online with people listening to 401 and 402 going, they kept referring to Mike, but that wasn't Mike. Yes, our third producer in a row is also named Mike because that is our policy at TOFOP. We will own. The only reason we went to Listener was we demanded
a guy called Mike.
Pay us what you want.
Could you give us a Mike?
Has to be named Mike.
Yeah, I know. Let's not confuse people anymore. It's another guy called Mike.
And we haven't even come up with a nickname for him. No Podcast Mike, no Mike Al. It's just Mike.
Yeah, well, Mike might not be our permanent producer also. Mike just might be passing through. He might be transitioning us out of Podcast Mike into someone. It might be outrageous who's not even called Mike, Michael, or Mike. So
you can only hope. And you promote your book. How's your book going? Bestseller.
It is a bestseller, which is very nice, but there's still more copies of it to sell. So if you have not bought a copy yet, I Am Not Fine, Thanks, it is called. And you can find it. It's on now for overseas listeners. You have to order it from the Book Depository in Australia. It is not available overseas, and you can't get it on Audible, unfortunately. Hopefully, if it does well enough in Australia, there might be some way that happens in the future. But at the moment, you'd have to order it from the Book Depository and get it sent to you. But that way you get James Fosdyke's amazing artwork on the front cover of it, of course. And Question Everything, my television show, we actually tape tomorrow after we're recording this, the final episode of that for the season. But all the episodes from the season are on ABC iView, and I've been super proud of that show. It's been really funny. And when people are hearing this weekend at the Sydney Opera House, Friday night and Saturday night, I am doing live Willosophy podcasts. I obviously have not done that show for a year, and I'm not sure if and when it's ever going to come back, but I am doing two of them live at the Sydney Opera House, two amazing guests. On Friday night, UK superstar Nish Kumar will be my guest. Nish is honestly one of my favourite comedians in the world, an incredible comedian and satirist. If anyone hasn't seen his routine about Ricky Gervais and trans people. It's honestly one of the funniest things. So anyway, he'll be a brilliant guest on Friday night. And then on Saturday night, India's biggest stand-up comedian. Heard of India? It's a pretty big country.
Yeah,
and this guy is their biggest stand-up comedian. His name is Veer Das. He's a super funny guy, and I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with him as well. So Friday night, Nish, Saturday night, Veer. Still some tickets available to both of those at the Sydney Opera House.
So there was, did you say it's part of Just for Laughs?
Yes, as part of the Just for Laughs festival.
They didn't want TOFOP back on stage after the robot? That didn't entice the organisers?
I mean, I actually thought that was weird, like, because I think in a way TOFOP also probably would have sold better, like than some podcast that hasn't been on for a year. You know, would have been a little,
and he's probably more closely aligned with comedy than
would
philosophy.
have been a little easier to plug than this thing that doesn't have regular listeners in a feed that I can't really tell people about. I would have thought, but you know, I'm not the guy making decisions.
And just one last thing, we'll plug the Patreon, patreon.com/TOFOP. We've been regularly updating it with videos and videos of the show, full-length videos if you want to see it. But we'll be doing brand new bonus podcast content after we record this episode or the next.
And I want to say I am off all social media, but I still appear on social media, but it's all been run by my management now. So I just don't, like, if anyone's trying to send me a message or comment on something that you think I'm going to see, I don't see that stuff anymore. So I apologize for that. But I just didn't want people,
you're being rude.
Yeah, thinking that I'm ignoring them when.
Well, I follow Gary Shandling's account. Is still people just keep posting on that, and occasionally I forget that he's been dead for a few years. I'm like, Gary Shandling's back. Oh, wait a minute, no,
and people are mad that he's not responding.
But the Patreon, just one last thing, the Patreon is where we'll be posting the ad-free. So if it grinds your gears, even listening to the podcast on your normal app, because there's ads in it, we will be posting clean episodes of TOFOP and FOFOP on Patreon. So if that's incentive to you, join Patreon. Will, this is from Jason. Jason's American. He says, "Hey fellas, I love listening to you mostly because it reminds me so much of living in Australia. It's like riding in the backseat of a car with two Australians up front I can barely understand, but I love to listen to. It is so comforting. I left home in Kansas City when I was a young man and I went to live in a place called Newcastle, Australia. Honestly, the best year of my life. The ocean every day, surfing, meat pies, tui's new, and it was breathtakingly beautiful."
Mm-hmm. It's a good part of the world, Newcastle.
It is. The language was hard though. Here's my impression.
I'll be in Newcastle, in January. I should plug that. I'm doing my What You Talking About Will shows at the Newcastle Comedy Club. I'm taking over Wednesdays in Newcastle, so every Newcastle or the Newcastle area, and I'm at the Sydney Comedy Store doing those shows.
So he says, the language is hard though. Here's my impression of me offering McDonald's to my Australian friend Shane. So I'll do the accents now just to differentiate between the two characters. Shane, are we going to McDonald's? You want a breakfast burrito? Oi, Maccas, fair income, mate. Had to rock up early and go to the physio and broke me sunnies because me ute was out of petrol, so I had to stop at the server, and then my thong broke and I asked the Sheila if she had any brack inches. Like, no, I was getting all aggro. I'm sorry, buddy. I have no fucking idea what you just said. Do you want a breakfast burrito or not? Yeah. Me shaking my head, walking up. Damn, I thought they spoke English here.
That's the best.
That's a fairly astute observation. He says, besides the language barrier, it was such a beautiful time. We took trips up the coast to Byron Bay and Fraser Island and the Great Barrier Reef, and down to Melbourne and Torquay because we saw Bells Beach from the movie Point Break.
Didn't look exactly like the movie Point Break.
or anything like the movie Point Break. I didn't see the big waves, but I had my first threesome that night with two wild Torquay women on the beach.
All right. That's what we call a Torquay party.
Yeah. I was reffing a beach volleyball at a place called How's That, but it closed for a bit, so I had to work at this nasty chicken factory called Steggles. God damn, it was gross and it smelled horrible, but I met amazing friends there. One time we went to our friend from Steggles' 21st birthday out to her family's farm in the outback, and everyone passed around this dirty fucking farm boot and dumped beer and vodka and rum and more beer into that thing and scolded the whole boot of liquor. Man, that was some wild times. Like, this is sounding like the best trip. I don't know what length of time this happened over, but I am so into this story.
It's very Australian too, though, isn't it? Like, it does like feel like you've really had a more authentically Australian experience than many of Australians have.
But you know how, like, whenever they try and like make an Australian film and they need to cast an American for sales, and you've got to work out a justification. Like, this could be Zac Efron. Like, Zac Efron apparently loves it in Australia, spends a bit of time here. You could make this film with Zac Efron, and to me, so far, it makes 100% logical sense.
And also, it's much more like Australian experience than how they try to portray what the Australian experience is. Like going to some party out in the bush and drinking rum out of a gumboot is exactly.
The only thing that was crazier were those huge fucking birds that would swoop down. God damn, those things are scary. Newcastle has like woods on campus or some environmental shit. I don't know. But there are these scary fucking animals right there on campus, and the magpies would always swoop down and scare us Americans. I thought it was a xenophobic thing. They never attacked the Australians, only the Americans. We finally figured out it was because we all wore baseball caps all the time. And to be honest, I skipped a lot of classes. I didn't even buy textbooks. I bought a wetsuit and a Mark Richards surfboard and got a flat right next to the ocean. Like, this is... Yeah. What's that? How Stella Got Her Groove Back? It's like the young man's version of How Stella Got Her Groove Back. Like, just moved to this like regional Australian town. He just has threesomes on the beach. He's just drinking out of gumboots. Finds himself, quits school, gets a flat by the beach.
I mean, it sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah, it really does. And it's all around the beach too. Everything good that's happened to him has happened on the beach.
Apart from the chicken factory, I would 100% go on this entire experience. If this was offered as like, you can go and have was his name Jason?
Jason, yes.
Yeah. If you could have the Jason's uni experience, like holiday, I'm like, I'd sign up.
Well, this is where it shifts gears. So we've gone through this, like, you know, whatever kind of genre of film you want it to be. But this last paragraph is so beautiful and poignant. It's like a Richard Linklater film. Okay. It's like Before Sunrise. So he finishes. My roommate moved out, so I got 3 Swedish. And it's not going where you think it's going. Because that's what I thought at first. After the threesome on the beach, I'm like, oh boy, here we go. But it doesn't. It's much more tasteful and beautiful than that. My roommate moved out, so I got 3 Swedish students to move in, and they were all beautiful, both the men and the women. Kristen was the one I liked the most. She had a Swedish boyfriend that lived nearby, but she would tell him he couldn't come in, and so she would just see him the next day. That's when I would smile listening to her say that, because I knew she would come to my room and lock the door behind her, and we would make out. Still to this day, when I hear a door knocking, I think about that time in Australia. Oh, the door clicking, sorry. The night that she told me, "Du hock finne ögon." I don't know what those words mean, but I knew they were a compliment by the way her lips turned up and the way she looked at me like that. Back then I was young and athletic and handsome, and I devoured compliments, so I wanted to know what she said, but I just looked at her, tucking her short blonde hair behind her ears, and I let those beautiful words by a beautiful woman on that beautiful Australian night hang in the air. You could smell just a hint of her perfume that mixed with the smell of the salt in the air, and the warm breeze floated through the windows, and the sound of those famous Newcastle waves crashing nearby. I knew I had to remember this moment. I simulated shudders on an expensive camera with my eyes. I had to take it all in. I knew nothing would ever feel that good again. And I was right. Love you guys. Thanks for doing the podcast. Thanks for always being my 2 Australian friends in the front seat.
Man,
that's that last paragraph. So I got curious.
Yeah, of course.
Like, what did she say?
Yes, absolutely. If you hadn't looked it up, I would need to immediately after the podcast.
Okay, so let me just check this out. So it's going to have to be Swedish to English, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Jason obviously listens, and it's kind of like the end of Lost in Translation. Do you need to know what Bill Murray said at the end? Should we just do a spoiler for Jason?
Well, Jason, we're about to look it up. I imagine that at some stage Jason's looked it up. But if he's never looked it up, if he's lived in a world where he does not want to know what it means, then Jason, turn off right now.
Yeah, okay. All right. So he's written it phonetically, so it might take a couple of goes to work out.
Again, he can't know how to write it. Oh, so it's phonetically, not okay. Yeah, all right.
Yes. Okay. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a compliment. Do you want to have a guess at what it is?
Give me what it is again.
It's a general specific compliment.
Yeah.
And then a specific physical compliment.
Yeah, okay. But say the sentence again.
Well, I don't know what the actual Swedish is, but it's du hoc, Heath heard du hoc finne ögon.
Du hoc finne ögon. You are a good kisser. You
No,
have
it's-
nice hair. You have a good face.
More poetic, I would say, and complimentary than that, and quite a common compliment you would say. to someone.
You are a handsome man.
You are beautiful, beautiful eyes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He said he was young and fit and athletic back then. Do you think, like, that's what I think the movie Before Sunrise captured so perfectly, is sometimes you'll just have those fleeting encounters. And it's great because real life didn't have to intrude on it. It was just all possibility. It was just all magic.
That's exactly right. It's perfect because nothing else ever happened. And it's just, he's captured in that moment. This is like a good story. This whole story is such a
It was
good
great.
story.
That's why I knew I had to read it out.
Yeah. It's like this story is the best movie I've seen in the last 2 years.
Oh, that's a good note to go out on. So we'll be back again next week. And we're taking a little break over Christmas. So I think there's a few more episodes to come out before then, but taking a little break over Christmas and then we'll be back in the new year. I'm Charlie Clausen.
I'm Will Anderson.
How long? Not long. Everyone relax.
Listener.